Whether we are there or not, ITSP Magazine still gets the best stories. Plenty of conferences and events spark our curiosity and allow us to start conversations with some of the world's brightest minds. In person or virtually, Sean Martin and Marco Ciappelli go on location and sit down with them at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Together, we discover what the synergy of these three elements means for the future of humanity.
Marco.
Sean, here we go.
I'm full.
You're full
of energy and trust today. I think our first episode, you said I had zero trust.
Just for me, I still don't. I still don't trust you. So I'm happy to hear about the energy, though.
I do have good energy.
Good.
We're getting closer to Zero Trust World 2025 in Orlando.
I know, and I know in half time you're kind of already moving in that direction from the West Coast to the East Coast, so you can be closer.
Yes.
Well, I'm gonna fly straight all the way from LA to Orlando, and that's gonna be exciting. It's gonna be
fun.
Zero Trust World 2025, February 19 to February 21st in Orlando, Florida. So I'm hoping for good weather and for a good time.
Yes, it should be both good things going on there. Hopefully we get to meet some new folks, one of whom will be Ryan Bowman. We'll get to meet in person. Ryan, here on the show today. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
It's good to see you. Good to meet you. And we'll get to spend some time together in person on location there in Orlando. You have been involved with Zero Trust World for a while now, and you have a session this year, which we're going to talk about, which is all about shadow IT and the impact it has on business and how security leaders and practitioners can approach the challenges related to that. And that's going to be part of your session. So we'll dig into that. But first, a few words from you on your role. I get the signal there, the thumbs down. But your role at ThreatLocker, my opinion, you have probably the coolest role because you get to manage a team and you also, I'm sure, get to connect to a lot of customers, which means you get to see a lot of stuff, real world that's happening. So talk to me a little about your role at ThreatLocker.
Yeah, so I'm the VP of Solutions Engineering at ThreatLocker, which means I manage a team of engineers who start working with our prospects really when somebody expresses interest in learning more about what ThreatLocker is, showing them how the product works, how we make them more secure. And then when they come on board, we get to make sure that they know how to properly implement and maintain the system. So it's really nice. The way that we're set up is where we can kind of work with that customer kind of start to finish. A lot of organizations will do a handoff when the sale is made. We try not to do that. We build a lot of synergy and learn to know each other as we go through that kind of proof of concept phase. And so we continue on and teach our customers then how to effectively implement Zero Trust in the organization. So yeah, it's really fun. We do get to see the not so fun stuff sometimes that our customers have to deal with and help them clean up bad things that have happened and things like that. But at the same time, we get to see a lot of successes too, where customers can come back to us and say, "Hey, I saw ThreatLocker block this attempt to attack," and so those are the really fun ones and rewarding to know that we had a hand in keeping an organization safe and secure.
Yeah, I mean the point is we know from prior conversation that ThreatLocker is growing incredibly fast, and so is this event, talking about doubling and something exciting. And you've been with ThreatLocker for a while, so tell me a little bit about your, I don't know, expectation going into this year event compared with maybe what it was a few years ago.
Yeah, it's changed a lot for sure. I'm really bad at remembering specifics, but I'm going to say the first year there was 100 or so people, I believe, at the event, something of that nature, to a few hundred the next year, to well over 1,000 this year. We're anticipating, and so yeah, it gets bigger and better every year. More speakers, more sessions. more information being presented, more opportunities to learn. We every year we've increased our capacity, and some of the very technical sessions are very popular. And every year we think we're going to add more capacity than we could possibly use, and every year they fill up again. And so that's really exciting. It's a really fun time. The energy level is super high. It's a cybersecurity event unlike any other that I'm aware of, where people really get that hands-on experience, and people really enjoy that. There's not a lot of opportunities to really get hands-on with some of these attack vectors, to really learn about what the attackers are really doing, and what that actually looks like, and get to kind of play around with a little bit, um, and see firsthand what some of those things look like. Obviously, so that we can then know what it is that we're defending against and how we can put protections in place to stop those types of attacks when they come at us. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of energy at the event, and it's always a great time.
100% energy. I want to I want to ask you your perspective on, because for me, zero trust is a concept that you try to figure out how to apply to an organization's infrastructure and business processes. And I believe it was with Kieran Human, we talked about zero trust being a mindset that you have to apply. It's not just a set of technologies, not just a set of processes, not just a team that knows how to connect that back to the business. It's all of that together. So I'm wondering your definition of zero trust, connecting with customers. Do they understand what it is? Do they understand that it's a mindset and it's a way of managing security connected to the business, and how, and if so, what that looks like? How does that connect to what's being presented during the conference?
Yeah, it's a great question. And like most things, some get it and some don't, right? There are people out there shopping for the silver bullet. And if we just get this in place, then we'll be good. And while we would like to believe that we can help an organization take a lot of steps in that direction just by implementing our technology, there is no one end all be all solution. You're absolutely right. It's a mindset. It's not just one product. It's really the way that you manage your entire organization, um, not just from a standalone security product, but everything else that you do. You want to look at that the same way. Is this trust inherently needed? Why am I giving access or trust or availability here? Do I even know that somebody needs this? Like really critically looking at all of the things that are going on and saying, is this even necessary? Um, and yes, we can help you with that with our product. Um, but you're right. It's a mindset, it's a philosophy, it's a concept, really approach to security than just a product. Yes, product like ThreatLocker is certainly a part of that, but it's not the only part of it.
Well, if we had a silver bullet, we wouldn't have this conversation, right? Number
Correct.
one, or all the events. It's a moving target, right? And I think that's why it's a way of thinking, is an approach, is a methodology, and not just one solution. One of those things that you need to look, because you may have been able to trust something years ago, and then with technology advancement and the attackers getting smarter or having more access, then something become something that you don't have trust in it anymore. I think shadow IT is probably a good example of that. Something that lingers in the back. So tell me a little bit why you choose to talk about that.
Yeah, well, it's something that actually comes up a lot from our customers. One of the problems that they're looking to solve, through their security stack, and seeing what ThreatLocker can do to help them with that, is this problem of shadow IT, and it takes a lot of different forms that we're going to dive into in the session. And as I talked to people and did some research on this as well, um, I think I even learned some new things, some new angles to ways that shadow IT has an impact, and maybe what we really mean by shadow IT. It's people doing stuff on their own that nobody knows. It's people circumventing systems and processes because easier, it's cheaper, or they perceive it to be better. All of these things, and perhaps the one of the key things that I really came away with in preparing for this too is a lot of the objectives, a lot of the reasons that will surface for people kind of turning to shadow IT is to become more productive. Like from an IT perspective, we look at it very negative as the why are you doing this? Like what is wrong with you? Why are you circumventing these systems and processes we have? Like there's a way that we should do this.
Until we need to subvert it ourselves in IT.
And yeah, and the
Because
reason
what we
is
bought
that
doesn't work right.
you're not giving us the stuff we need. And so I had to kind of take a fresh look at that and not just cast all negative light on maybe those individuals who we see circumventing things, and maybe taking a look at ourselves and saying, why did I make it so hard for you to do your job that you had to go find a workaround? And so, I'm going to try to look at that dynamic a little bit too in that session and have us, look at some of the way that we operate IT and security and things of that nature, and make sure that we're not kind of pushing people into that direction because we make it so hard for them to function.
And it's not just, at least based on my conversations with CISOs on this topic, it's not just the fact that it's a small unknown technology. It sometimes can be something big. For example, organizations have a Microsoft license, and therefore they ask their employees to use Teams to communicate. But engineers like Slack, so they go off and use Slack. And if it's not procured through the business, Slack then becomes a shadow IT thing. And not necessarily that there's risk in Slack as a technology. It's more about how IT manages it, how security does look at the risk involved and where the data is going and things like that. So can you talk about kind of the view of the organization in terms of what shadow IT is and how it impacts IT, how it impacts security, how it impacts risk, how it impacts operations, and the lot?
Well, yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there with data, right? So nothing wrong with Slack versus Teams versus message, whatever, messaging of choice. Like, pick one. It doesn't matter to me. um, but if IT is not involved, if we don't know what's going on, if it's not procured properly, and people are popping data out there, employees leave, things change. Where's the data? Well, it's still out there, still accessible, perhaps to people who should not have access to it. You lose control of your data, company data. Somebody could be dropping, intellectual property into there, and then there's no way to get it back because it's not a company channel, to manage. So I think that's one aspect that people, kind of forget about. I think sometimes they don't, see that part of it so much. You brought up a good point in procurement as well. We actually work with a customer um, who implemented ThreatLocker to control what applications people could use, and controlling the usage of software. And as they were auditing all the different software that they had, by eliminating the duplicates that they had inside the organization, in other words, maybe we're paying for Teams and we're paying for Slack, right? By reducing those duplicates and paying multiple licensing fees for essentially the same task, they more than paid for the cost of implementing ThreatLocker, right? And so a lot of times those costs go unidentified, unknown, unquantified, I guess I would say, and people don't always understand what they're actually paying, what the cost is, for some of those things that just slide by.
Yep. It's an excellent point, DeMarco. I know you're going to jump in here, but
No, go.
just there, I was on a call earlier that was talking about a plug-in to a messaging system. I won't mention names of either, but it was basically an AI sentiment system or sense tool, if you will, that was monitoring the messaging to identify who in the team is not getting along with each other. so that they could report that to the manager, perhaps to HR if it gets a little too escalated. Imagine, so that's a little creepy just in itself, but imagine that data living in another organization that then could be used if compromised to do certain things to that team, to that organization. And that, I presume in that case that was discussed this morning, that's a shadow IT. Somebody installed it thinking it was cool, right? So
it's more of a creepy IT than shadow.
Yeah, so I guess my point is there's stuff installed not just in the main applications, but in plugins and other extended services through APIs that do stuff that you may or may not want to do, and have access to stuff you may or may not want to enable.
Yeah, I mean, browser plugins, are a big thing, and everybody's got their favorite Chrome, browser extensions. And it seems like every month or so we read about how Google and others have removed hundreds of extensions from the store because they found them to be not ideal in some way or other, collecting data or not doing whatever the reason, not maybe not outright malware, but just collecting data that is not relevant to it and things like that. So the one we often have talked about, a number of months ago, the most popular dark mode plugin to make your browser a dark mode was developed in China. That doesn't mean that it's bad, but it was the most popular one. Everybody was using it. We don't know what it's collecting or isn't collecting. Maybe if we know what that is, maybe there's another one that's just as good that we feel better about. That's just one example, but those kinds of things, come up over and over again, just because people just don't know. Hey, it makes my browser dark. I like it. I'm going to use it with no thought to what else you might have gotten along with that you didn't even think about.
And I think that's key. It's kind of like, you're talking about the IT, you're also talking about the culture and how you can learn the feeling of the employees and say, well, maybe I'm not providing what they need, therefore I'm going to go for something on my own. But then you can look and say, well, maybe I do need to provide that. But also is that mindset that, yeah, it may be a little thing, but it's not necessarily just a switch in the wall to turn off the light and make it dark in your room. It's still connected, right? It's still on your computer and your browser and your system. So it's an entire, again, I go back to the mindset. I always look at the human element and the psychology of this more than the IT, like you guys probably do. But talking about this, to your session, I mean, what do you expect to deliver in terms of what the audience you hope is gonna live with, and who do you think is mostly for? Because I know that there are going to be customers, partners, there's going to be people that are not part of the company, they're just there for the labs to learn. So I'm sure you want everybody, but if you had to pick, who is it for?
I think the kind of the CTO, the IT director, I think hopefully will find a lot of value here. And we'll get a little bit practical too, not too deep into the weeds. So even the IT administrator type of person, I think we'll find some value. But we're going to talk a lot about the exposures, like the data being one of them that you talked about, and some other areas where shadow IT does create risk within the organization. That's where the IT director hopefully is concerned about risk. The CTO, the upper management, understanding it's not just about a user choosing their favorite tool and being okay with that. Maybe it's okay, but maybe it creates risk if it's not done correctly. So that risk side, I think, is something that we'll talk about. But then again, we'll get very practical too with how to deal with some of those things, how to protect against some of those things that we want to prevent. And like I mentioned earlier, maybe give the IT people a little bit of a hard time about some of the stereotypes that we might have as IT people of not being very flexible And there's a time and a place for that. There's reasons for that at places, but maybe not everywhere. And we can maybe work with people a little bit better, and eliminate the need for some of those things to become an issue.
I presume, and you can confirm and maybe elaborate as much as you want, but a lot of times presentations I see are theoretical. Like this could happen, but how much of it, what you'll be discussing and presenting and whatnot, is rooted in your team's exposure to what's happening in the real world? Banks are different than retail, are different than manufacturing, so on. Different stories bring different scenarios and use cases together, different environments, different cultures, different technologies. It's all a mix, but once it comes down to reality, it really hits home for a lot of people. Tell me about what you hope to share there.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I volunteered, got drafted, whichever it was, to do this presentation is I'm drawing on some of my own personal experience too as an IT provider before joining ThreatLocker, and I saw a lot of these things. I saw people doing things in ways that shouldn't have been done. And I saw some of the bad things that can come out of that. And of course, now being on the ThreatLocker side, I can see and provide a lot of answers and solutions of how we can protect against and mitigate against some of those things. So there's certainly some of both. There's, hey, this kind of thing has happened, so if this can happen, this certainly could too. Even though I may not have a personal story for that, but it's a pretty easy line to draw where you might see one thing turning into another. So certainly a mixture, but definitely some practical, real world situations that have occurred.
I love it. Well, your session is Dangers of Shadow IT. So certainly one that I'll be attending because I want to hear some of the stories and the lines drawn to what else might be possible. The conference, Zero Trust World, is February 19th through the 21st. Marco and I are excited to be there on location in Orlando with the ThreatLocker team and customers and partners and other attendees. Dr. Zero Trust, Chase Cunningham, is going to be there. I'd be excited to see him in person as well. And of course, your CEO, Danny Jenkins, looking forward to him and seeing him in both of their keynotes. And Ryan, looking forward to seeing you there as well.
Absolutely looking forward to meeting you guys in person as well.
Yep, absolutely. It's about learning, but it's about networking. I know there is some parties going on and networking, and that's why we go to conference, to meet new people and eventually meet old friends. And we're looking forward to be there. I'm looking at the countdown. It's 14 days, 04 hours, 19 minutes, and 7 seconds. 6, 5. So
awesome.
Pack your bag, Sean.
We recorded this.
Well, whatever. Minus, you have to run the calculation. Minus the time that when we recorded. So
yeah, what time zone you're too.
It's an equation right here.
But no, the other, you mentioned networking, Mark, and I'm going to close with this because it is around the people, but going back to the beginning, it is about the mindset as well. And if you're sitting behind technology all day, you're going to have the mindset that the tech provides. When you have a chance to connect with folks like Ryan and the ThreatLocker team and the other attendees, you get a different perspective and perhaps I'll say better mindset that you can apply and bring back to the organization. So I'm looking forward to the conversations that do just that, make us think. That's what we're all about, Marco, here on ITSP Magazine. So Ryan, thanks for joining us. We'll see everybody at Zero Trust World. And please stay tuned for more coverage coming to you from Orlando here on ITSP Magazine.
Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Sean and Marco's on-location event coverage conversations. Please take a moment to give the show a good rating and leave a comment. Remember to share this podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues. Come back for more conversations and follow Sean Martin and Marco Ciappelli as they continue their journey toward redefining cybersecurity and society.